With the faculty?
They sent an email saying that everybody should receive it by tomorrow.
With the faculty guys?
They haven't sent tickets.
I can't afford faculty's tickets.
Oh, I said way 336. I'm up
I can't afford that. Good evening. Welcome to the Newton County Board of Education work session of this Tuesday, August the 9th. Could we bow our heads for a moment of silence, please? Thank you. Pledge allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Fear, we have any special recognition?
Not this evening.
Okay, we have no public participation. Need approval of the agenda, please.
So moved.
Have a motion by Ms. Baker. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Coggins. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. Motion carries. Need approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Johnson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Coggins. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. Motion carries. Superintendent's report.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The superintendent's report will begin with the operations report. A few items of note, business and finance. Our SPLOST 4 distribution is $946 approximate $1,000, which is an increase of $41,400 from last month's collection. This collection was accrued in the fiscal year 2016 since it was for June taxes. The average for the first 17 months of SPLOST 4 is $897,000. The monthly average for SPLOST 3 was $881,000. The June TAVT collection was close to $60,000. Item 2, salaries and benefits for June for 10 and 11th month employees are accrued in the fiscal year 2016 as these payments are for work for the 15-16 school year. Most of our July and August QBE revenues apply to these salaries and benefits, so they have been also accrued into fiscal year 2016. Some expenditures may look greater this month as we must prepay some expenses such as insurance and software license fees at the beginning of the year. The school system is awaiting final collections for 2016 from the tax commissioner and still processing expenditures which relate to fiscal year 2016. A final correct fund balance for the August financial statement should be available at the September meeting. Facilities. The Porter Performing Arts Center is pretty much complete with its interior modifications. Final cleanup and punch list items are being addressed. Paving, striping, and site work have been completed. Landscaping and irrigation are being installed in select areas. Students and staff are currently utilizing the new parking lot during the school day. Procurement. Our procurement department was awarded the 21st Annual Achievement of Excellence in Procurement Award for 2016 from the National Purchasing Institute. The award recognizes excellence in procurement by measuring organizations against standardized benchmarks that represent best practices within the profession. The Newton County school system was one of 4 school systems in Georgia and one of only 25 school systems throughout the United States and Canada to receive the award for 2016. This is the 5th consecutive year the procurement department has received the AEP award. Could you please join me in a round of congratulations? Pupil transportation. The average per gallon cost for diesel fuel purchased in July was $1.85. And Elvis, the safety owl, and the Newton County School System School Bus Safety Team will begin visiting elementary schools on August 16th to ensure all elementary school students are able to participate in our SOAR program, which stands for Safe, Orderly, and Respectful. On the second page, school nutrition, just want to share with you that My Payments Plus, the system we use in order to online purchasing of meals for July was about $33,000. This is a 21% increase over the same period in 2015. The last item, our school nutrition department hosted Strong for Life training provided by Children's Healthcare of Atlanta at Georgia Piedmont Technical College on Monday, July 25th. This training also included managers from Newton, Walton, Social Circle school districts. Managers participated in an educational session about how to make healthy foods and how to encourage kids to make healthy choices as they come through the lunch line. CHOA, the Children's Healthcare, they provided the S&P managers with free marketing materials for use in the cafeteria that help promote healthy choices among students. And that concludes the operations report, unless there are any questions.
Any questions? Item B.
Item B, curriculum, instruction, technology, enrollment report, and CIT report. Just a few items I want to highlight. The first one being item number 1. Our school system hosted the 2016-17 teacher induction program. 193 teachers participated in 3 days of professional learning, and all of that's part of our onboarding process, trying to get them ready to function in the Newton County way. So again, it was a very, very good experience for those people. Item 2, during the exact same time, pretty much on July 20th, our technology department hosted its yearly Teach for Tomorrow conference. It offered more than 60 sessions. The sessions focused on helping teachers integrate technology, student use of technology in their lessons. We had more than 400 educators attend the conference. This is a really spectacular event. Most school districts don't have anything like this, so we're truly fortunate to have forward-thinking folks in our technology department. On item 3, which is page 2, on July 25th, all school system faculty and staff attended the 16-17 opening session. During this session, Superintendent Fury set forth the vision for the 2016-17 school year. You see the hedgehogs. We are becoming the hedgehogs. Again, it's all about high quality service, and we're really trying to spread that mantra throughout the entire school system. The Newton County School System team also heard from nationally known speaker Jim Van Allen. The last thing that I just highlight for you this evening is that on item 10, July 21st, all secondary schools held middle and high school transition camps for rising 6th and 9th graders. Again, those are pivotal years where we want to make sure that we keep our children engaged. So just really proud of everybody who puts the work in to make sure that those programs are successful. And that concludes information that I'll be sharing today with the CIT report, unless there are other questions or other items of interest.
Any questions? Okay.
Okay. With the enrollment report, we're giving the enrollment report this evening. We are working on our 10-day enrollment count, which will end on Thursday. So we'd like to provide a more accurate number for you next week on August 16th.
Okay, fine.
And at this time, I believe we have a presentation, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Allison Jordan, who works with our testing department.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity this evening to provide additional information regarding our selection of the Iowa assessments. And if you will, I have a presentation for you. This past October, President Obama reported, "I've heard from parents who worry that too much testing is keeping their kids from learning some of life's most important lessons. I've heard from teachers who feel so much pressure to teach to a test that it takes the joy out of teaching and learning, both for them and for the students. I want to fix that." According to President Obama's testing action plan, assessments must be worth taking, high quality, time limited, fair, in equity and educational opportunity, fully transparent to students and parents, just one of multiple measures, and tied to improved learning. Our new education law, the Every Student Succeeds Act, was signed by President Obama December 2015 and takes additional steps to support smart, effective assessments and to reduce overtesting, including efforts to encourage states to limit classroom time spent on statewide standardized testing and to strive for continued improvement and innovation in assessments. A recent report of the Education Commission of the states identifies various testing trends across the nation. In Connecticut and New Hampshire, they've replaced the Smarter Balanced 11th grade assessment with the SAT. In Colorado, they allow districts to apply to the state to pilot their own district-created or selected test in place of statewide assessments. Alabama, Arkansas, Wisconsin, and Wyoming, they will use the ACT Aspire, which is aligned with the 11th grade ACT, as a replacement for the state's high school math and language arts assessments. Ohio implemented a comprehensive safe harbor plan that delays the impact of results from new assessments on multiple accountability fronts. Idaho recently waived the requirement that 10th graders pass the Smarter Balanced assessment. Michigan reduced testing time in certain grades by 2.5 hours per grade. Indiana waived the administration of the social studies assessments in various grades. Florida eliminated the 11th grade English language arts assessment. In the state of Georgia, Senate Bill 364 revises provisions relating to student assessments. This year, the Georgia milestones will be administered as follows. The end of grade assessments will be administered in the areas of English language arts and math in grades 3 through 8. Science and social studies will be administered in 5 and 8 only. Therefore, we've eliminated the science and social studies in grades 3, 4, 6, and 7. End of course assessments will remain the same. As part of Senate Bill 364, if authorized by federal law, the Georgia Department of Education may establish a pilot program for local school systems that have an existing program of multiple formative assessments during the course of the academic year that result in a single summative score that is valid and reliable in measuring individual student achievement or growth and assessing individual student needs or deficiencies to utilize such local assessments in place of end of grade or end of course assessments if provided for in the terms of the local school system's flexibility contract. As a result of the testing interruptions and lagging data of the Georgia Milestones administrations, we have proposed to the State Department, with your support, to administer Iowa assessments as allowed for in the provisions of the Senate bill. Here, we've identified some of the things that Georgia has reported were problems with the testing this past spring. The TSM technology lagging occurred with both content loading and sending student responses in online administrations in grades 3, 5, and 8. Tuesday, April 29th, was known as the worst day of testing this past spring. Massive problems throughout the state with DRC. Social studies content packets were too large and caused delays in loading items. And districts that elected to use iPads for their administration experienced problems widespread. There were approximately 3.9 million tests administered in the state, and the state reported that 6.5% of those were interrupted. Newton County students experienced those same problems. The TSM technology presented many problems throughout the testing window. Regardless of our efforts, those issues could not be resolved and were experienced throughout the testing window. The statewide issues forced us to adjust and lengthen our testing window. And for us specifically, the Department of Education provided their numbers based on their calculation methods for our interruptions. They reported that we had 3% of our test sections interrupted, which equals 1,220. However, it is very important to note that the way the Department of Education and DRC captured that information did not include every student that was interrupted in our district. Due to the technical issues experienced by many districts throughout the state, the scoring processes were delayed, which resulted in teachers not having the information needed to complete their end-of-year processes. As shared recently, Newton County is seeking the State Department's approval of the use of the Iowa assessments in lieu of the Georgia Milestones end-of-grade assessments in grades 3 through 8. These assessments will provide educators, families, the public, and students with valid, reliable, coherent, and timely information to measure progress and improve outcomes for all learners. The Iowa assessments will provide information to support standards-based instructional decisions, report individual progress and growth to students, parents, and educators, report group progress and growth to educators, administrators, and policymakers, as well as provide relative comparisons for interpretation of assessment results. An essential feature of an assessment system is its ability to measure student growth. Georgia's growth model has one metric, which is observed growth. It answers the question, did the student grow more or less than academically similar students within Georgia? In our selection of the Iowa assessments, we examined the growth model, which is comprised of 3 metrics: expected growth, observed growth, and what is referred to as value added. The expected growth metric answers the question, did the student grow as expected from one year to the next? The observed growth answers the question, did the student grow more or less from one year to the next? And the value added answers the question, based on the observed growth metric, did the student grow more or less than expected? We believe the Iowa assessments will provide our students, parents, and teachers with reliable, valid, and timely information. I am pleased now to introduce our guest for this evening. They are the Iowa assessment experts, and they will provide an overview of the benefits. Dr. Steve Dunbar, Iowa author, also serves as a professor of educational measurement at the University of Iowa, as well as a co-director of Iowa testing programs. Victoria Driver, senior product manager for Iowa Assessments and COGAT, and Tara Mathis, Account Executive for Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. If you will join me in welcoming our guests.
Okay, not a problem. Just don't let me forget it. Welcome. My name is Tara Mathis. I'm the account executive for Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. I've been I'm working with Iowa Assessments and COGAT for 9 years, and have been lucky enough to work with Allison Jordan and Newton County districts for a couple of years itself. In joining me, we've introduced Dr. Dunbar, Iowa author, and Victoria Driver. And I'm going to have to stand over here just a little bit because we've got a little bit of a tech things right here. So Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, as you well know, is a leader in the education industry. Along with our K-12 educational materials, digital content, and then along with our assessments as well, we have been a leader for a very long time in a tradition of excellence. You may be familiar with some of these names in terms of Journeys, Collections, Curious George. We've all been familiar with that one. We've also got the Iowa Assessments, the Woodcock-Johnson, and the COGAT Mental Abilities Test as well. With Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, our tradition of assessment excellence goes very far in history. As of 1979, Riverside Publishing was adopted as the company established it as our testing arm, which we have is for Iowa Assessments and also COGAT. We have that tradition of growth, excellence, and service. We have our Iowa Assessments and COGAT assessments are administered all over the world, actually. And they have decades of research-based, valuable, reliable tools, and they help each other realize our full potential among our students. Iowa Assessments, we have a legacy of innovation and partnership with the Iowa Testing Program. HMH and the Iowa Testing Program have over 80 years of thought, leadership, research-based, and development within that partnership. So we come along with that gold standard of service, excellence, and research-based. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Steven Saylor.
Thank you, Tara. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's a real pleasure to be here to talk about the Iowa assessments, something that I have spent, I can now say the better part of my life working on. That wasn't always true, but now I'm afraid I've reached the point where it is true. I also want to acknowledge a colleague of mine at the University of Iowa, Dr. Catherine Welch, who is unable to be here for this presentation due to a prior commitment, but her contribution is felt throughout all of the remarks that I'm going to say about the Iowa assessments, and in particular, much of this presentation is due to her efforts. I will try to do my best to emulate performances of hers that I've witnessed myself. We want to start with the concept of what we might call purposeful educational testing. Purposeful testing is the kind of testing that is really focused on particular uses. And in the context that you're faced with, and every school district, in fact, is faced with across the United States, purposeful testing lies somewhere in the middle of requirements that districts are mandated to fulfill by their state or federal government, and what the local needs of a district are to advance instruction, teaching, and learning. My own beliefs about assessment are that purposeful testing moves more to the right of this slide than it does to the left. And some of my remarks may sort of make it clear how strongly I feel about that, because I truly feel that the purpose of assessment in any educational context is to provide information to parents, students, and teachers that advance student learning. If that is what we mean by the term assessment. Let's see, I've got to find the scroll button. There it is, right?
You got it.
No?
Do it.
I missed it. Oh, there it goes. It went. Another aspect of perspective that I want you appreciate very much and that I think is sometimes lost in the headlines about the kinds of assessment activities that do exist in local districts. That red piece of this puzzle is designed to represent what I would call large-scale assessment. Assessments like the Iowas are, I would call, large scale because you're planning to use them on a district-wide basis. In some places, they are used on a statewide basis. So large-scale assessments do carry with them certain characteristics. We use the terms reliable and valid to represent those. But I would say that each of these other types of activities that go on day in and day out in the course of a student's instruction in a given school year and over time have their own reliability and validity to them. And it's very important that we understand that a large-scale assessment has a clear purpose when it fits into this big puzzle. If it doesn't fit into this big puzzle, I would say it's not a purposeful assessment. Okay, oh, very nice, thanks. That's going to help a lot. You won't believe. So we're interested in information that is sound, that is accurate, that can lead to actionable steps in the course of a student's instruction, in the course of a teacher's planning for instruction. And that actionable information may involve the measurement of student achievement, the monitoring of growth, making relative comparisons. And here I want to introduce an idea about relative comparisons that you might not always think about. But when I say relative, most people would say, oh, you want to be able to compare your group's performance to a larger group, a statewide group, or a national norm. And that's a very important aspect of relative comparisons. But in addition to that, for an individual child, I'm really interested in whether or not an assessment can provide information about that child's strengths and weaknesses. Is that child performing as well in mathematics as in reading? And if a system is created to make such comparisons, I might be able to take advantage of it by recognizing a difference between a student's reading skill and mathematics skills, and if their math skills are higher than their reading skills, I'm going to give them reading material that has some mathematics content in it to help foster the development of their reading skills. And an aspect of our scoring system with the Iowas makes that possible, and I may get to that as an example later on. We do want to be able to make informative decisions about students and about groups of students, and at the same time we'd like to be able to do all of these things and satisfy what are the core state or federal requirements for accountability. Dr. Jordan gave a very nice introduction of the present climate of around large-scale assessment in the United States today. In fact, she gave a very nice summary of some of the key characteristics of the Iowa assessments, too. Thank you, Allison. The Council on Great City Schools in October of 2015 produced a report that what became the focus of some of President Obama's concerns about large-scale assessment. And you can see from the points in this bullet list regarding testing time, costs, lag time between the actual date of testing and when results are available that have really raised the conversation, I think, to an important level where we're examining this idea of what is purposeful in assessment. Okay, next. At the same time, a report issued by the Educational Testing Service analyzed characteristics of what you've read about in the press as the opt-out movement. In New York State, for example, about 20 to 25% of their high school students opted out of the statewide assessment this past year, and that was the second year in which that percentage was around 20%. So 1/5 of high school students in the state of New York are choosing themselves or with their parents' support to not even sit for the state exam. So this is another indication of of the a concern that is being raised nationwide. And on the next slide is reference to a recent report that outlines the case that can be made within the legislation that was recently passed on ESSA to allow states to create flexibility for local districts. And so I think it's important for you to understand that you're not alone in this desire to find a way to proceed with a student assessment program that really it gets at the core purpose, which is the improvement of teaching and learning. Okay, our philosophy and our approach in research is captured by this little slide, that we actually believe less testing can provide more information if that testing is, number one, research-based, and number two, is focused on a clear design and development program that leads to scoring that represents actionable information. And I think this is something that in the measurement field it's almost as if it's a lost art. When we read about new kinds of innovations in assessment, my perspective on this, again, is, you know, reflecting more of my life dedicated to this than less, that we've sort of lost the notion that a good assessment should be able to provide a broad array of information without taking an inordinate amount of testing time away from instruction. But when we see new innovations being proposed, one of their key characteristics of late seems to be that they require more time and more time taken away from instruction. So less is really more when we can reduce time, when we have less intrusion on instruction, when the resources required to administer an assessment and obtain results actually go down rather than up. And at the same time, we are getting from that assessment clear, actionable information. Now, in the case of your situation, trying to satisfy state requirements and meet local needs, I want to sort of juxtapose those general needs, valid measurement of the Georgia standards, reliable monitoring of student growth, with a design program for the Iowa assessments that is really not only consistent with those goals in the state of Georgia, but which would be consistent, because of the research that goes into those design efforts, would be consistent with the same requirements that might exist in the state of Iowa or the state of Florida or the state of New York. There is a generality of content in English language arts and mathematics that was shared among states long before the Common Core state standards came to be. And that core of content has been the focus of development of the Iowa assessments for a long time. This is just sort of a slide to indicate that assessment doesn't sort of live alone. It exists in concert with standards, in concert with instruction, and all of these things have to be in sync in order for the program to be working well. My own view would be that assessment is part of this circle, but it's sort of the last in line. I would see standards as coming first and instruction based on those standards. And assessment has historically been thought of something that should try to follow the content standards, follow the instruction that it leads to, but not drive them. And I think another careful thing we have to be careful of in assessment is making sure that the test itself isn't driving instruction, that it isn't designed in such a way that students need particular coaching in order to even be ready to navigate the screens that they're going to encounter. Again, that would be more time taken away from instruction. Thanks. I think we can skip this one in the interest of time. The Iowa assessments are organized in their design and development in a very kind of rigorous process. And this graphic is just designed to give you an idea of how we might start with the kind of information we want to create from an assessment, the type of inference we want to make. For example, is a student ready for credit-bearing college coursework? And from that, we would try to ratchet down a level to figure out what areas of and standards might be represented in that college coursework. Say it's a pre-calculus course at the beginning of a student's college mathematics. We would, from that content analysis, develop specifications for the test, and then we would go seek out trained teachers to write questions, we call them items, for that kind of assessment. And this sort of idea that the questions themselves are a subset of the larger inference we're trying to make from the score really leads to a very systematic, rigorous approach to test design and development that involves field testing, that involves extensive item analyses and prior analysis of actual students' responses to questions so that we can check them for things like what we call differential item functioning, fairness to students from different types of demographic groups. Next slide. The goal of all of this is to provide as much information as possible to as many audiences as possible. And those audiences I've sort of described in passing, but they are all listed under the bullets on these under multiple audiences, and you see some repetition of the idea that there are multiple purposes associated with each of these audiences. Another key feature which Dr. Jordan's slides went into, in fact, a little greater detail on than this one does, are that we design as part of the program a variety of metrics that satisfy particular purposes and particular audiences. So on the left-hand slide, you might look at the purpose that's described as informing instruction. And as Vicki Driver will talk about in a little bit, we have a report in which we break down a student's achievement on a reading test into smaller chunks so that we'll be able to report how many questions a student was asked that deal with just literal understanding of what was read, and how many did that student, of those questions, how many did the student get right. It's a very detailed kind of diagnostic report that we believe is very well suited for teachers and educators to understand how groups of students are doing. Another example would be meeting state requirements, where we do research to link scores on the Iowa assessments with scores on particular statewide assessments. An example of that that's going on now is a study we're doing in cooperation with Hugh Mifflin to link scores on the Iowa tests with scores on the Georgia milestones. So we expect to have, probably in a year from now, what we would call a concordance table that will relate a particular score on the Iowa assessments in a metric of interest to a score on the Georgia milestones, and then would determine whether a level of performance on the Iowas was consistent with what might be called proficient on the Georgia milestones. There are other metrics related to national or relative comparisons and to monitoring student growth, which I think are going to be reflected in a few of the following slides. So growth is sort of a big deal in assessment. It was, again, another lost art because 35 years ago, my mentors at the University of Iowa would have said one of the most important characteristics of the Iowa Test of Basic Skills was that it provides a good, strong basis for measuring student growth from year to year. And in the interim, we got away from the concept of growth. We started focusing on whether students were proficient or not proficient, turning what is a developmental idea about students that happens over long periods of time into a yes-no decision that was taking place year after year, and when that yes-no decision really didn't serve any core purpose. What we really wanted to see was growth over time. So the growth metrics that Dr. Jordan described are designed to do that, and I won't go into any more detail than she already did, except to say that they have been carefully researched, they have been utilized in districts across the country, and we have built a strong reporting system around them to help move the focus of assessment away from a single point in time type of measurement to a concept of how students are developing over time. And I think I won't say any more about that idea of growth. It is something that we're able to do because of the way the metric is designed and the research that is supporting it, so that we can look at the ideas she described related to expected growth within a school year or across school years. So if you were to give an Iowa assessment in September of the school year to try to get information to teachers about goals to set for students during that year, you could also give an Iowa assessment at the end of the school year in late April or May, and make judgments about whether a given student grew as much as he or she was expected to do based on the test score in September. I think I can skip this, except that goes with the idea again that rather than thinking about learning as a yes-no, mastery, non-mastery concept, we think about it as a continuum, something that's developing over time, and something which we recognize students experience different rates of growth. Just as students hit a growth spurt in height or weight, students hit growth spurts in learning. And every experienced teacher could tell you that boy, that child learned as much in the month of October as I would have expected him to learn the whole year long, and it's just a spurt. Teachers understand this, parents understand this, and a scoring system that does provide information about student growth has to recognize that students do start in different places, and our expectations for a student in one place might not be quite the same as our expectations of growth for a student starting in a different place. What that leads to on a school-wide basis or a district-wide basis is the ability to aggregate information. So this is just a small snippet of a report that exists in the electronic scoring system that would summarize the percentage of students who exceeded their expected growth represented in blue, that met their expected growth represented in green, and who were not meeting the expectation in red. This can be a very nice kind of summary information that would allow a school board to understand something more than what percentage of our students were proficient on the state test. We can skip that one. The other thing that this growth model allows us to do, and what has been validated by our research relating to scores on the Iowa tests with performance of matched students in college-wide courses, is to develop a system where we're able to track the extent to which a given student is, quote, ready to perform in a credit-bearing course in college. And so this little graph up in the right represents the probability or the chance that a student with a given standard score on the Iowa assessments would achieve a B or above in a college math course. And you can see as the Iowa score goes up, that probability goes up. And you can see that the probability of a student achieving a C or greater is even higher than that. And the readiness reports that Vicki Driver is going to describe are based on research that has actually linked scores on the Iowa assessments to scores in specific college courses, as well as scores on college admissions tests, the ACT and the SAT in particular. I am going to turn over the podium here to Vicki Driver. She's going to talk in particular about some of the reports that hit at various audiences, parents, educators, community leaders, and so on. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Thanks for having us here. I promise I'll go through this rather quickly because I don't want this presentation to take longer than actually taking an Iowa test would take. Can you move to the next slide for me? Wow, this is mind-boggling. But the reason that I chose to show you this report is that it has tons of information in one display, and we're going to drill down in just a minute. But this one is an individual performance profile on a student. We could do something similar for a group of students, a grade of students, a classroom of students, a cohort of students. So I'm going to drill down and show you some of the types of information that we have. One of the things that we would tell you when you're considering adopting an assessment system is one of the best places to start is looking at the reports and looking at what kinds of things the assessment can tell you. Next slide for me. So first I'm going to look at this little section on the upper left side, sorry. So this one shows the different kinds of subtests, so the areas that we can assess, reading, written expression, conventions of writing, the kinds of composites that we can draw from that. So for example, I can look at those things in reading and language, and I can draw together an English language arts component. And I can also give you a composite across an entire assessment, including areas such as science and social studies and math. Some of the scores that I'm showing here are a standard score. That's the growth metric that Dr. Dunbar mentioned. The other thing we can do with that standard score that's really powerful is we can track that over time on longitudinal reports. This one's just a snapshot in time, but I want to give you an idea of the variety of measures we can show. That NPR stands for National Percentile Rank. That's a comparison to a large-scale administration that we've done with a representative sample of students from across the U.S. so that you can look at these results and understand for each student, each group of students, how they're doing relative to peers across the United States. Similarly, that column labeled LPR is a local percentile rank, so we can take your own cohort of students in Newton County who've been tested, and we can tell you within your students who's rising to the top, who's in the middle, and who needs a little more work to catch up. Additionally, on the right-hand side of this, you can see that I've graphed those national percentile ranks. So very quickly, I can look at that bar chart and tell you a couple things about this student. And by the way, this is all made-up data. I'm not showing you anybody's real data, but a real student report might look like this. But something I can tell you very quickly looking at this is that this student excels in the reading and language arts areas and falls behind in the math area. So the core composite score is right at the middle, but that's because they're doing well in English language arts and they're not doing so great in math. Do you want to move to the next slide for me? So I want more information about that. Can we hit the next one? So in addition to telling you about the various areas that we assess, we also give you information within the areas that we assess. So I don't know if you can read much of this, but what we're doing here is we're breaking down within reading, we're looking at it a few different ways, informational versus literary text. Explicit meaning, key ideas, vocabulary, implicit meaning. How is the student doing on those different areas within? Additionally, we also score it by cognitive levels. So when Steve is talking about using our assessments in a lot of ways to get a lot of power out of it, one of the things that we do is we tag each of the items multiple ways so that we can pull these different kinds of meanings. Rather than having to give the kids 100 different items, we can give them 40 items and look at them 3 or 4 different ways and give you a lot of information about what that student knows. Additionally, you can see that we've done some graphing here as well, and we've told you how many they've gotten right or wrong in the areas. And again, very quickly, you can just look at that graphic and understand, here's a student that's excelling in those reading and language arts areas, some real strong strengths like vocabulary and informational text. And there are other areas that are more toward the middle, like the literary text and the understanding of key ideas. When I look over at math, I can see that this student falls below the average on everything relative to other students, but I also get more information about which are the areas within math that this student is needing more help than other areas. So this is a very instructionally useful way to use this information. Additionally, I've tagged this to a set that we call the Iowa skill domains. But what we also do is we tag these items to other skill domains. And so within our reporting systems, we can toggle back and forth. For instance, I could show you a similar report tagged to the Common Core or the Georgia State Standard domains. Can we hit the next one? And we also talked about those college readiness scores. So for instance, we can tell you starting in grade 6 whether we feel students are on track to be successful in college work. This is that same student, and we've already seen that he or she has a strength in reading and language areas. However, they're on track in reading. They still have work to do in the language area to truly be on track for college work. And that's not saying college work today. That's saying if this kid stays on the same trajectory for the next several years, he or she will not be on track unless they bump it up. Not surprisingly, math needs work and science needs work. We can also predict to the ACT and SAT scores, and this is presuming if the student stays on this trajectory and takes those tests in about 11th or 12th grade, time for entry to college, roughly where is that student going to be scoring? One of the things Dr. Dunbar did not mention is the close cross-pollination that the Iowa testing programs have historically had with the ACT. In fact, the folks who started ACT really sprang out of the Iowa testing program. So this whole focus on college readiness and what does it take to be ready to do college work and how do we assess that actually sprang from the Iowa testing programs. You want to hit the next one? And this is just another one that's showing these same scores. So for these students, we're predicting an ACT composite, an SAT math, and an SAT reading. And you can see some of these students a couple of these students are in great shape to move on to college in Georgia. And some of these students are maybe not headed that direction, and others need more work. Those are all the slides that we have today. We'd really just like to wrap it up by saying, you know, we've put a lot of time and effort, blood, sweat, and tears into this assessment. We're excited to work with you. Want to hit our next slide? This paper is one that we have published on our website. It's an example of the type of information that we provide around the assessment, a full wraparound suite to help you understand the information that we're telling you about your students and our commitment, both at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt and at the University of Iowa and Iowa testing programs, to working with you at Newton County to continue to see that you get the most out of your assessment program. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that information. Any board members have any questions?
I do. Okay, I have a question for you, Dr. Jordan, regarding like the test, because you mentioned that the state did not count everything as an interrupted test, but we know that a lot of things were interrupted not only in our county but other counties. Did they give a list of what they considered as interrupted?
The interruptions were measured by the students that had actually logged in as recorded through the TSM technology and then were kicked out of that testing. So the number of attempts each time to log into the TSM, but in order for the state to count that, the student had to successfully log in and then be kicked out of that, whereas we had interruptions that would not even allow that part to take place.
Right, okay. Okay, so the numbers would be way higher. So if the student was logged in and then the computer shut down or went off, but the student still remained logged in, it really didn't kick them out. So that wasn't counted.
Correct.
Okay, okay,
Or just lag time.
yeah,
Just lag time wasn't
Yes, and lag time was there as well.
okay,
We had students that, throughout the district, that attempted to log in, and they would sit there continuously for 15,
Waiting.
20, 30 minutes attempting to log in. Students that I spoke with individually when visiting the schools even shared with me, well, once I saw the teacher showing me how to log back in, I just kept trying it until I was successful. And those attempts were, and those interruptions were not part of the number that the state reported.
right. And that is an interruption.
Yes.
So,
Yes,
I
it
mean,
is.
not only is it an interruption right there, but I mean, a student that's sitting there 15 minutes waiting for their test to come up, that's an anxiety interruption by itself.
Yes.
So, and then my other question actually has to do with testing trends, and any of you guys can answer this because I know you talked about the Georgia growth model and stuff, and so I have a question about that. Do you guys, like, as far as testing trends, ever see where you believe that the testing will go back to looking or look more at growth versus a comparison of the students across the board? And what I mean by that is, and I can give an example, a lot of times when testing comes out, we look at the schools, we compare the schools with other schools in the county, or we compare what the school got compared to state, what the state received and stuff. But in my opinion, I want to look at gains. I want to look at growth. And I'll use just a student by itself if I am a parent. But let's say my child was failing reading at the beginning of the year. Well, I would want my child to have an A, but it would be unrealistic to move from an F to an A. That's just unrealistic. However, if my child was able to move from an F to a D or a C by the end of the year, that is growth and gains to me, but we don't publicize or look at that in testing. And so I really haven't heard where like legislators or statisticians or testing evaluators are really arguing to kind of look at growth and gains more than comparison. Do you guys think that will become a testing trend? I mean, it makes more sense.
Can we take you on the road? No Child Left Behind created a mindset that was well-intentioned, but it created a mindset that asked us to focus on just one outcome, and that was right at this boundary between not proficient and proficient. Let's just count the number of kids on each side of this boundary, and we'll call it a day. So we have analyzed data from our own state to look, for example, at what kinds of gains were being made by students in SINA schools, schools in need of assistance according to the regulations of No Child Left Behind, versus gains that we were seeing in schools that were not being called out for SINA status. And in many, many schools, if you look at growth, you see greater than expected gains among those children in SINA schools than you do in schools where there has been no designation. Now, that information doesn't exist if all you look at is the number of kids above and the number of kids below. You don't give teachers any credit in those buildings that are designated as SINA schools for the growth they're instilling in their children if all you do is count the number above and the number below. And the focus that we've tried to create on developing growth metrics as well as relative comparisons is really designed to provide the information at the local level for actionable steps that are based on a particular purpose. In some cases, that will be, how do we compare to our peers. In other cases, it will be a focus on how our children in struggling buildings are gaining over time, because they do gain over time, and we want to have metrics that will help reveal that. So
Yeah.
please come and help us create those,
Yeah, well,
create
I
those
just
messages.
want more people to look at the
Yeah.
gains because
Yeah.
that's important.
Yeah.
We do a good job. You guys do a great job here when you release scores at including gains, like how much each school gained. But then you have other people who release articles and they don't focus on the gains, they focus on the comparison. And so then, like you said, the teachers who have helped those students to increase and really put in work, and the students, that work goes out the door because everybody is so focused on reading that article that compares them to the state versus seeing that they did gain. So, just my little soapbox.
You know, the board members.
I have a question about just, is it pencil and paper? Is it online assessments? Is it both? Is it?
It's both. We also offer device-based assessments, so the iPads and the Chromebooks. And something I forgot to mention when I was speaking to you is that we also have a 10 business day scoring turnaround, and that's for paper materials. It's quicker for online.
May I
So,
add
all the
something
above.
to that?
She experiences, yeah.
We have administered online Iowa assessments. This is our third year now, and we began Monday administering the Iowa and what we are referring to as a pre-screener, universal screener baseline, so we can gather the information that has been shared this evening. And we're not experiencing interruptions. Everything performs as expected. And for the first time ever, because of the confidence that we have in the online platform, we will allow the use of iPads for some of those tests next week in a pilot school so that we can ensure that our systems are set up as they need to be. So we're excited.
So the state is okay with 6.5%
Yes.
of interruptions, or at least they're
That is
they're okay.
correct.
It seemed to be okay with 6.5%. Maybe they're making some adjustments. You're saying we've had none so far?
None.
Do you guys see interruptions? Is that, I mean, what's your rate?
We work very hard to ensure that we don't see interruptions, and I go to a weekly meeting. I'll be there tomorrow morning, in a Wednesday morning meeting, where we graph how many tests we've administered each day, and we also keep track of our downtime, and that downtime metric includes things like weekends, when we schedule downtime to make some major adjustment, and it's north of 99% uptime. I mean, like 99.7 or something, and that 0.3 is because we were installing a new server at midnight on Saturday. So things have been going very well.
Great.
I have one question. Has there been any efforts to try and make this a module that this is just a standard module for all school systems? The reason I'm asking that question is because our society has become more transit, and we have kids and families moving from one place to another, and it will give the teachers an advantage if they were able to see where that student is when they come to that school and move forward from that point on. Is there any efforts to try to get something done? Because
Well,
the reason
I can say in our own.
the reason I'm asking that question because they come up with these different programs what they want,
Right.
but they don't have any teeth
Right.
into how to monitor and gather data.
Yeah, and a lot of the capabilities for doing that deal with information that can exist in a system that can follow the student and can allow a new district to link to that student. In our own state program, we are able to track students, and a student that moves from one district to another can retrieve the student's testing record from a previous district. So the capability does exist. It requires a lot of upfront organization and planning for the information that can be used to create those links when the students move from one district to another.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, moving on again. Thank you very much for that information.
Mr. Chairman, may I say one thing?
You certainly may.
I just would like to acknowledge the team and thank you so very much for coming here to support us in our efforts to try to do something that we know will be beneficial to both our teachers and students. And we appreciate that you've taken time out of your schedule to support Dr. Jordan. And Dr. Jordan has spent countless hours and much of her time trying to prepare a presentation that provides enough information to ensure the confidence of the board and our community in the work that we wish to undertake. And we're just waiting now to hear from the state with regard to where they stand and our petition for a pilot to try something a little bit different and still be respectful of the state's position and their model, but at the same time give us the flexibility to try something new. And so thank you so very much for being here this evening. We appreciate you. And thank you, Dr. Jordan, for your part.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming.
We have no old business, so we'll move to new business. Item A.
Item A, 21st Century Community Learning Center grants. Recommendation, superintendent recommends acceptance of continuation grants for our after-school academic programs, commonly referred to as ASAP, totaling $1.4 million for 21st Century Community Learning Centers be approved. A little bit of background. The school system received a federal grant in 2012 from the Georgia Department of Education to provide funds for operating 21st Century Community Learning Center after-school programs for a total of 250 students at Alcovey High, Clements Middle, Cousins Middle, Liberty Middle, and Veterans Memorial Middle School. In 2014, 3 new federal grants were awarded to expand 21st Century services to 450 additional students at Newton and Eastside High, Indian Creek Middle, Fairview, Flint Hill, Middle Ridge, Porterdale, and West Newton Elementary Schools, as well as the Washington Street Community Center. And again, this is brought for you for information this evening. If there are any questions.
Any questions? Okay, at this point, I know some of you got some distance to drive, so if you like to leave now, this will be a good time to leave.
I forgot to unfold the paper. I just saw
But if
Thank
you
you so
need to leave,
much.
we understand that. Okay, y'all have a good night. Okay, thank you, Dr. Lockhart. Item B.
Yes, sir. Item B, renewal contract for 21st Century Community Learning Centers program. This one is slightly different because it's asking for the same annual renewable contract services for 21st Century, but be awarded to Washington Street Community Center of Covington, Georgia, be renewed for an additional term. The contract is for the current 16-17 school year. This facility is linked to the grant and is considered a sole source for purposes of the 21st Century program. And again, and the contract value for that is $60,000. Again, that is before you this evening for information.
Okay, any questions as it relates to item B? Okay, having none, we'll move to item C.
Item C, renewal of maintenance agreement for Arrowhead Wireless Access Points. The superintendent recommends the maintenance agreement for Arrowhead Wireless Access Points be awarded to Infinity Network Solutions Incorporated of Macon, Georgia, and that be renewed for an additional term. The effective date will be August 19th and will expire August 18th, 2017. This was originally awarded August 2012 through a competitive solicitation process, as well as the school system's yearly E-rate submissions. It included all necessary hardware, software, as well as maintenance and support. The maintenance agreement being renewed includes a software subscription, customer access, and support for all Arrowhead wireless access points within the school system. The cost is approximately $43,000, and the cost will be paid for with budgeted FY17 general funds.
Any questions as it relates to item C? Okay, having none, we'll move to item D.
Item D, purchase of maintenance program for Cisco infrastructure equipment. The superintendent recommends the maintenance program needed for Cisco infrastructure equipment be purchased from Infinity Network Solutions of Macon, Georgia. The contract is for the current 16-17 school year. The product that we're looking at is Cisco SmartNet, a multifaceted technical support service, and it provides school system personnel with technical assistance, online support, and detailed diagnostics to solve problems with its core switches, rack switches, and phone infrastructure. This service also provides ongoing operating system updates, rapid hardware replacement, and on-site replacement and when needed. This is something that we have done annually. The cost is approximately $209,000 that has been budgeted with FY17 general funds.
Okay, any discussions as it relates to item E? Having none, we'll move to item
E.
E.
Move to item E.
Yeah, item
Yes, sir.
E, yes.
Surplus property. Superintendent recommends the attached items be declared surplus and disposed of per board policy DO. And those surplus items are attached for your review if necessary.
Any questions or discussions as it relates to item E? Having none, we'll move to item F.
Item F, the superintendent recommends that the Office of Curriculum and Instruction purchase Handwriting Without Tears from No Tears Learning. A little bit of background. The Georgia Standards of Excellence in English Language Arts mandate the teaching of handwriting in grades kindergarten through 4th. The standards show a progression of handwriting skills as students move from one grade to the next. It is the expectation that teachers implement all of the Georgia Standards of Excellence with fidelity and efficacy. Purchasing Handwriting Without Tears will give teachers a tool to provide knowledge, skills, and materials necessary to effectively teach print writing and cursive writing. It teaches students to understand the handwriting process, incorporates foundation skills prior to paper and pencil, combines developmental and multisensory teaching strategies to teach print and cursive writing, provides handwriting assessment, applies simple yet effective remediation strategies, and this is a research-based product. And again, the standards that are associated with this are listed here for your reading if you care to look at those.
Okay, any questions as it relates to item F? Having none, we'll move to item G, which will require some board action tonight.
Yes, sir. Action required for item G, purchase of computers and associated peripherals. The superintendent recommends the computers and associated peripherals needed for the Career Technical and Agricultural Education, also known as CTAE program, be purchased from Bytespeed of Moorhead, Minnesota, the Dell Corporation of Round Rock, Texas, and Apple Incorporated of Austin, Texas. Background, the CTAE program provides both innovative and traditional programs of study via career pathways at middle schools, high schools, and the Newton College and Career Academy. A summary of the recommended technology purchases for the CTAE program are reflected in the chart below, and which have already been mentioned. The recommendations above are made after a review of purchasing agreements available for use by the school system. And by using a combination of these different vendors, we're able to realize cost savings. The total value is $376,000. This cost will be paid for with budgeted FY17 local CTAE funds and capital funds. And action is requested this evening.
Okay, having heard the information related to item G, I need a motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Have a motion by Ms. Coggins. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bailey. All in, any questions or discussion?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Why are we getting different makes and models of laptops?
From different companies, yes, sir. Again, these cooperative purchasing agreements allow government agencies to aggregate purchasing power to realize cost savings. So by breaking it up in this manner, we're actually saving money by doing it in this way. And again, we're looking at different things. We're purchasing laptops from one company. We have a certain type of desktop computer and peripherals that we're purchasing from various companies. And this is utilizing state of Georgia statewide contracts. Again, by doing it this way, we're able to make more fiscally sound decisions.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, same, motion carries.
Aye.
Okay, we have 4 yeas and 1 nay. Item H.
Item H, also we're requesting action on this item this evening, renewal of contract for student information system. The superintendent recommends the annual renewable contract for a student information system award to K-12 Solutions Group of Commerce, Georgia, be renewed for another contract term. And the contract is for the current 16-17 school year. There are 4 entities within Griffin RESA that work collaboratively to develop and issue a request for proposals for a student information system. The system that we have is Infinite Campus. We've been using that for multiple years. The estimated contract value is $148,000, and again, this will be paid for with budgeted FY17 general funds.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve item H, please?
So move.
Motion by Ms. Baker. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Coggins. Any questions or discussion? Having none, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, same. Motion carries. Item I.
Item I is local board training plan.
Yes. So this is the time that we have to declare how the board will achieve its state required training hours. And so you have the document that I sent, and you received at the last board meeting, and with the whole board training options. And so my thought would be that between now and next meeting, we could come up with a time that we would agree to participate in the whole board training, and that you could think about how you'll achieve the remaining 6 hours of your required board training. And then we can put it in our paperwork for Tuesday and submit it to the state.
Okay, great. Item J.
Item J, resolution to support the Georgia Vision Project for Public Education. The superintendent recommends that Newton County Board of Education support the work embedded in the Georgia Vision Project for Public Education and would determine areas of transformation for the school system as we continue our efforts to improve educational opportunities, experiences, and outcomes for all students. A little bit of background. The Georgia Vision Project for Public Education began in 2009 as collaboration between the Georgia School Superintendents Association and the Georgia School Boards Association. These groups realized an urgent need to critically examine the components of Georgia's educational system, identifying an exciting opportunity to establish principles and offer recommendations which will transform the current system into one that is relevant for today's children and youth. To date, the project has grown to include over 35 partner organizations, agencies, and groups. And they have several goal statements that they make, which would include a resolution of support to be signed by the Newton County Board of Education.
Any questions as it relates to item J?
Is this to be decided tonight?
No.
No.
Okay, having none, item K.
Item K, there is recommendations made in executive session. Action item, the superintendent recommends the approval of personnel recommendations as presented during executive session.
Okay, I need a motion to approve item K. So motion by Mr. Johnson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Discussion?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just making sure you catch me. I need to recuse myself from one item on that list,
Okay.
or one person on the list. So
Okay, what's that item number, you remember?
it didn't have a number, but
Okay.
it's the person stated in executive
Okay,
session.
great, okay. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, same. Motion carries. Other matters of interest. Anyone have anything else they'd like to discuss? Mr. Bailey? Mr. Baker?
I don't have any.
Mr. Johnson? Ms. Coggins? Having none, can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So move.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, same. We stand adjourned.
Who did the second?
We did not.